The world of automotive history is filled with innovation, strange choices, and unforgettable creations, but among them are a few cars that defy easy categorization. Some peculiar, some brilliant, and some a blend of both. One such creation is the Lancia Y10 Turbo, a hatchback that brought together quirky design, luxury aspirations, and turbocharged performance in a way that only the Italians could. Today, we dive into the compelling story of a small car that left an outsized impression on automotive enthusiasts and historians. The Lancia Y10 Turbo came into the world in 1985. The car's origins trace back to Italy, where it was conceived under the larger umbrella of Fiat Group, which owned the Lancia and Autobianchi brands. Though known as the Autobianchi Y10 in Italy, it was marketed internationally under the more prestigious Lancia badge, reflecting Fiat's ambition to position the car as a luxurious option in the small car category. Autobianchi had long been Fiat's experimental arm, often testing new concepts and technologies in their vehicles before those ideas were used in other Fiat Group brands. The Y10 was a product of that same philosophy, combining practicality with innovations that were uncommon in its segment. Designed by Fiat's in-house style center under the leadership of Vittorio Guidella, the Y10 had a distinctive appearance that made it stand out from the competition. It featured a vertical rear end with a satin black tailgate, which was unique in that it remained black regardless of the car's body color. This design choice wasn't just about aesthetics, it also contributed to the car's impressive aerodynamics. The Lancia Y10 achieved a drag coefficient of 0.31, an impressive figure for a small car in the mid-1980s. Flush-mounted side windows, recessed door handles, and a roofline that tapered toward the rear all contributed to this aerodynamic efficiency. The Y10 Turbo was built on a platform shared with the Fiat Panda and Fiat Uno, but its positioning was entirely different. While the Panda was aimed at rugged practicality and the Uno at mainstream buyers, the Y10 targeted those who wanted something a bit more refined and exclusive. Inside, the car featured materials and equipment that were often seen in larger, more expensive vehicles. Buyers could opt for Alcantara upholstery, a luxurious synthetic suede material that was typically reserved for high-end cars. The dashboard was minimalist but functional, with well-placed controls and a digital climate control system, something almost unheard of in a car of this size and class at the time. Electric windows and central locking were also available, adding to the car's upmarket appeal. Under the hood, the Lancia Y10 Turbo was powered by a 1,049 cubic centimeter inline-4 engine. This small but mighty engine was equipped with an IHI turbocharger and an intercooler, allowing it to produce 85 horsepower at 5,750 revolutions per minute and 91 pound-feet of torque at 2,750 revolutions per minute. These might not sound like earth-shattering numbers today, but in a car that weighed just 1,742 pounds, they were more than enough to deliver an exciting driving experience. The Y10 Turbo could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 9.5 seconds and had a top speed of 112 miles per hour. To handle the increased heat generated by the turbocharged engine, the exhaust valves were sodium-filled, a feature typically found in high-performance cars. The engine was paired with a 5-speed manual transmission, which was geared to make the most of the engine's torque. The first few gears were relatively short, providing quick acceleration, while the higher gears allowed for relaxed cruising at highway speeds. The Magneti Marelli Digiplex electronic ignition system ensured precise timing, optimizing both performance and fuel efficiency. Fuel was delivered through a Weber carburetor, which was a common choice for turbocharged engines at the time. The Lancia Y10 Turbo's suspension system consisted of McPherson struts at the front and a rigid Omega axle at the rear. This setup was chosen to balance comfort and handling, a delicate task in a car this small and light. The front McPherson struts provided responsive steering and good road holding, while the rear axle helped keep the car stable during cornering. The car's low weight and compact dimensions made it agile and easy to maneuver, particularly in urban environments. The braking system featured disc brakes at the front and drum brakes at the rear, a common configuration for small cars of the era. Dimensionally, the Y10 Turbo was a true super mini. It measured 133.5 inches in length, 59.4 inches in width, and 55.9 inches in height, with a wheelbase of 85 inches. These compact dimensions made it ideal for city driving, allowing it to squeeze into tight parking spaces and navigate crowded streets with ease. Despite its small size, the Y10 Turbo offered a surprisingly spacious interior, thanks in part to clever packaging. The spare tire was mounted under the hood next to the engine, freeing up space in the rear for luggage. The trunk had a respectable capacity for a car of this size, making the Y10 Turbo practical as well as fun. The car's performance was enhanced by its lightweight construction, but this also meant that drivers had to be aware of the car's limitations. While the turbocharged engine provided plenty of power, the car's small size and low weight could make it feel twitchy at high speeds. Turbo lag was also an issue, as it was with most turbocharged cars of the era. Drivers had to anticipate the delay between pressing the accelerator and the turbocharger kicking in, which could be challenging in certain situations. The Lancia Y10 Turbo was aimed at a specific type of buyer, someone who wanted a small car but didn't want to sacrifice style, comfort, or performance. It was not a car for everyone, and its premium price reflected that. In Italy, where it was sold as the Autobianchi Y10, it found a loyal following among young professionals and urban drivers who appreciated its combination of practicality and sophistication. In other markets, where it was sold as the Lancia Y10, it was seen as a quirky but charming alternative to more conventional small cars. Despite its unique appeal, the Lancia Y10 Turbo faced challenges in the market. The turbocharged engine required careful maintenance, and some owners found it to be temperamental. The car's premium positioning also meant that it was more expensive than many of its competitors, which limited its appeal to budget-conscious buyers. However, for those who could afford it, the Y10 Turbo offered a driving experience that was unmatched by most other cars in its class. Over its production run, the Lancia Y10 underwent several updates and revisions. The turbo model remained a key part of the lineup, but other variants were introduced as well, including more luxurious and more fuel-efficient versions. By the time production ended in 1995, the Y10 had cemented its place in automotive history as a car that dared to be different. It may not have been a commercial success on the same scale as some of its rivals, but it left a lasting impression on those who experienced it. Today, the Lancia Y10 Turbo is considered a classic among enthusiasts. Its combination of quirky design, turbocharged performance, and luxury features make it a sought-after car for collectors. Finding a well-preserved example can be challenging, as many have succumbed to rust or neglect over the years. However, for those who are lucky enough to own one, the Y10 Turbo is more than just a car. It's a piece of automotive history that represents a unique chapter in Lancia's story. The Citroën AX GT is a car that is often overlooked in the world of hot hatches, but it has a story filled with ambition, experimentation, and a drive for efficiency. It was part of Citroën's push to create a lightweight and economical car that also delivered exciting performance. The AX GT was never the most powerful or the fastest car of its time, but what made it stand out was how it achieved speed and agility without relying on a big engine or excessive horsepower. Instead, it was built around the principle of keeping things simple and light. With a curb weight of around 1,592 pounds, the AX GT had the kind of power-to-weight ratio that made it a thrilling car to drive. But how did Citroën arrive at this formula? What compromises did they make? And why is the AX GT now a rare sight on the road despite being a car that many enthusiasts loved? In the early 1980s, Citroën was looking to replace the Visa, a car that had been on sale since 1978. The goal was to design something smaller, more efficient, and cheaper to build. The project that would become the AX started in 1983. Engineers wanted to make a car that could compete with other small hatchbacks like the Peugeot 205, Renault 5, and Volkswagen Polo. Citroën's parent company, PSA Peugeot Citroën, was looking to streamline its lineup, and there were early discussions about making the AX a shared model with the Talbot brand. However, by the mid-1980s, Talbot was struggling, and PSA decided to discontinue it. This meant that the AX would be sold solely as a Citroën. The AX was officially launched in October 1986 at the Paris Motor Show. At first, Citroën introduced base models with small engines, including a 1.0-liter and a 1.1-liter four-cylinder engine. The focus was on fuel efficiency, and Citroën heavily promoted the AX's aerodynamics and lightweight construction. One of the most innovative aspects of the AX was its use of thin steel panels and plastic body parts in non-structural areas. The goal was to keep the car as light as possible without compromising safety. The design team, led by Chief Designer Proton, created a compact angular shape that minimized air resistance. This was a time when automakers were starting to take aerodynamics seriously, and the AX benefited from these advancements. Despite its focus on economy, Citroën knew that a performance version was necessary. The market for small hot hatches was booming, with cars like the Peugeot 205 GTi, Ford Fiesta XR2, and Volkswagen Golf GTi gaining popularity. In 1988, Citroën introduced the AX GT, a sportier version that would take advantage of the car's lightweight construction. The AX GT used a 1.4-liter TU3S four-cylinder engine with a twin-choke carburetor. It produced 85 horsepower at 6,400 revolutions per minute and 80 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 revolutions per minute. While these numbers might seem modest, the car's low weight meant that it had a strong power-to-weight ratio. It could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 8.5 seconds and had a top speed of around 112 miles per hour. This made it quicker than many of its rivals with larger engines. The 5-speed manual transmission allowed drivers to make full use of the power, and the gear ratios were well matched to the engine's performance characteristics. Citroën engineers gave the AX GT a revised suspension setup compared to the base models. It had McPherson struts in the front and trailing arms with torsion bars in the rear. The result was sharp handling with minimal body roll. The unassisted rack and pinion steering was direct and responsive, though it could feel heavy at low speeds. The braking system included disc brakes in the front and drum brakes in the rear, which were sufficient for the car's light weight. The AX GT had a distinctive appearance that set it apart from the base models. It featured unique alloy wheels, GT badges, and sportier bumpers. The interior was simple but functional, with supportive seats, a basic dashboard layout, and a few sporty touches. However, cost-cutting was evident in some areas, as the car lacked the high-quality materials found in more expensive hot hatches. While the AX GT was praised for its performance and handling, it also had drawbacks. The lightweight construction that made it quick also made it feel fragile. The thin steel panels were prone to rust, and the interior plastics were not very durable. Additionally, the lack of sound insulation meant that the cabin could be noisy at high speeds. Safety was another concern, as the car lacked modern crash protection features. Despite these issues, the AX GT developed a loyal following among enthusiasts who appreciated its driving dynamics and simplicity. By the early 1990s, Citroën was preparing to replace the AX. The AX GT remained in production until 1993, when it was succeeded by the Citroën Saxo. Over the years, the number of surviving AX GTs has dwindled, partly due to rust and the car's relatively low value on the used market. Today, well-preserved examples are rare, and the car has gained recognition as a classic hot hatch. In the United Kingdom, fewer than 40 AX GTs were registered as of 2018, making it a rare sight on the road. The Citroën AX GT was a product of its time, designed to be quick and efficient without relying on brute power. It was never the most famous or the most refined hot hatch, but it had a unique character that made it fun to drive. It represented an era when automakers experimented with lightweight construction and simple engineering solutions. While it may not have the same legendary status as the Peugeot 205 GTi or the Volkswagen Golf GTi, the AX GT remains an important part of hot hatch history. Enthusiasts who have driven one often speak about how its lightweight and responsive steering made it feel connected to the road in a way that modern cars rarely do. The late 1990s were an interesting time for car manufacturers worldwide. Hot hatches were in demand, and car makers competed to create affordable performance cars. In Malaysia, Proton, a company known for producing budget-friendly cars, had been working with Mitsubishi since the 1980s, but in 1996 they acquired a majority stake in Lotus, a British company famous for its sports car engineering. This gave them a new opportunity to create a car with handling tuned by one of the most respected names in performance engineering. What followed was the Proton Satria GTi, a car that would go on to be remembered for its driving experience. The Satria GTi was based on the Proton Satria, a three-door hatchback introduced in 1994. That car was itself derived from the fourth-generation Mitsubishi Mirage. The standard Satria was not a performance car, but Proton wanted to change that. After acquiring Lotus, they decided to work together on a special version of the Satria, one that could rival the best hot hatches of the time. The Satria GTi was officially introduced in 1998. Unlike other Proton models, this one had a clear focus on handling and driving dynamics. The suspension was tuned by Lotus, giving it better cornering ability and sharper steering. The body was widened with bolt-on wheel arch extensions, and the car sat lower than the standard Satria. These changes were not just for looks, they improved stability at high speeds. Under the hood, the Satria GTi was powered by a 1.8-liter double overhead cam 16-valve four-cylinder engine known as the 4G93P. This engine was sourced from Mitsubishi, which had used it in several of their cars. In the Satria GTi, it produced 138 horsepower at 6,000 revolutions per minute and 121 pound-feet of torque at 5,500 revolutions per minute. Power was sent to the front wheels through a 5-speed manual transmission. The car weighed around 2458 pounds, making it relatively light for a hot hatch. This combination allowed it to accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 8.5 seconds, with a top speed of roughly 126 miles per hour. Lotus played a significant role in refining the handling. The front suspension featured McPherson struts, while the rear had a multi-link setup. Engineers improved the anti-roll bars, springs, and dampers to make the car more responsive. The power steering was recalibrated for more precise control. The car also came with 16-inch alloy wheels fitted with 205/45 ZR16 tires. These improvements made the Satria GTi handle well in tight corners and high-speed turns. The exterior of the Satria GTi stood out from other Proton models. It had an aggressive body kit, including flared wheel arches, side skirts, and a rear spoiler. The front bumper had a wide air intake with mesh inserts. The dual exhaust outlets at the back made it clear that this was not just another economy hatchback. The car was mainly available in metallic silver, a color that became closely associated with the model. Inside, the Satria GTi was equipped with Recaro seats, which provided better support during spirited driving. The seats had a combination of fabric and leather, with the Recaro logo embroidered on the headrests. The dashboard had white-faced gauges with red needles, giving it a sporty look. The gear knob was made of aluminum, and the pedals were also metal. Other features included air conditioning, a CD player, power windows, and power-adjustable side mirrors. While the interior design was simple, it was functional and focused on driving. The Satria GTi was launched in several markets, including Malaysia, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Singapore. In the United Kingdom, the car was introduced in 1999 with a price tag of £14,500. This placed it in direct competition with cars like the Peugeot 206 GTi and the Ford Fiesta XR4. Despite being from a lesser-known brand, it gained attention for its handling. British car magazines gave it positive reviews, with Evo magazine calling its steering and suspension among the best in its class. However, the interior design was criticized for feeling outdated compared to its rivals. In Australia, the Satria GTi was appreciated by enthusiasts who valued its lightweight design and sharp handling. The car performed well on both urban roads and winding country routes. It gained a loyal following among drivers who wanted an affordable performance car. In Malaysia, the Satria GTi was seen as a point of national pride. Proton had previously been known for making practical but uninspiring cars. With the GTi, they showed they could produce something that enthusiasts could enjoy. The car became popular among young drivers, and many owners modified their vehicles with aftermarket parts. The handling by Lotus badge on the side of the car became a symbol of its engineering improvements. Over time, the Satria GTi became a sought-after model. In the United Kingdom, well-maintained examples started to increase in value. A 2004 model was listed for £4,250, showing that demand was still present years after production ended. In Malaysia, restoration companies like Dream Street Restoration gained recognition for restoring Satria GTs to their original condition. Their work attracted attention from international buyers, including collectors in Germany, who admired the car's handling characteristics. The Proton Satria GTi remained in production until 2005. By then, newer hot hatches had entered the market and the GTi faced increasing competition. However, its reputation endured, and it influenced later Proton models. The Satria Neo and its R3 variants carried forward the idea of affordable performance. While Proton never produced another car quite like the GTi, its legacy continued through the enthusiasm of its owners and restorers. Today, the Satria GTi is remembered as one of Proton's most exciting cars. Its combination of lightweight design, sharp handling, and simple but effective engineering made it stand out. It was not the fastest hot hatch of its time, but it offered a genuine driving experience. The involvement of Lotus gave it credibility among enthusiasts, and its rarity outside Malaysia added to its appeal. For those who owned or drove one, the Satria GTi remains a special car, a reminder of what Proton and Lotus could achieve together. In the early 1980s, the world of compact performance cars was heating up. Manufacturers were pushing the limits, squeezing more power into small cars while keeping them practical for daily use. It was a time when turbochargers were no longer just for high-end sports cars or race cars. Renault was no stranger to this trend. The French automaker had already made waves with the Renault 5 Turbo, a mid-engine hatchback that dominated rally stages. But now, they had their sights set on something different. They wanted a turbocharged car that was affordable, practical, and still fun to drive. This led to the creation of the Renault 11 Turbo, a car that would go on to have a short but impactful life in the hot hatch world. What made this car stand out? Why did Renault choose the 11 for this performance upgrade, and how did it fare against the other hot hatches of its time? To understand, we have to go back to its origins. The Renault 11 was introduced in 1983 as the hatchback version of the Renault 9. Designed by Robert Opron, the Renault 11 had a boxy shape, a front-engine, front-wheel drive layout, and a focus on practicality. It was a direct competitor to cars like the Volkswagen Golf and Peugeot 309. The base models were simple economy cars, but Renault saw potential for something more. In March 1984, the Renault 11 Turbo was launched. Initially available only as a 3-door hatchback, a 5-door version followed a year later. Renault knew they needed to make significant changes to transform the 11 into a real performance car. The biggest change was under the hood. The Renault 11 Turbo was powered by a 1.4-liter inline-4 engine with a Garrett T2 turbocharger. This was the same engine used in the Renault 5 Alpine Turbo, but it was modified to produce 105 horsepower at 5,500 revolutions per minute and 119 pound-feet of torque at 3,000 revolutions per minute. It had a bore of 2.99 inches and a stroke of 3.03 inches. Renault paired it with a 5-speed manual transmission that sent power to the front wheels. The 11 Turbo could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 8.7 seconds and had a top speed of about 120 miles per hour. To improve engine performance, Renault installed an air-to-air intercooler, which increased the density of the intake charge. The car also had a low compression ratio of 8.05 to 1, making it well suited for turbocharging. To prevent engine knock, Renault fitted an electronic ignition system with a pinking sensor. The chassis and suspension were also modified for performance. The Renault 11 Turbo sat lower than the standard version, with the front suspension dropped by 1.2 inches and the rear by 0.8 inches. The front suspension used McPherson struts with coil springs and an anti-roll bar. The rear had trailing arms with transverse torsion bars and a wider stabilizer bar. Renault also upgraded the brakes with ventilated discs at the front and solid discs at the rear. The car came with 1 75/65 R14H tires on alloy wheels, providing a balance of grip and ride comfort. The steering was a rack and pinion system that required 4 turns from lock to lock, with a turning circle of around 32 feet. Visually, the Renault 11 Turbo was distinct from the base model. It had an aggressive front grille with 4 rectangular headlamps and integrated fog lights. The body featured aerodynamic enhancements, including a front spoiler and side skirts. The rear had a subtle spoiler, turbo badging, and unique striping. The bumpers were polyester with black rubber inserts. Inside, Renault upgraded the cabin with velour cloth upholstery, deep pile carpeting, and a leather-wrapped steering wheel. The instrument panel included gauges for oil level, water temperature, oil pressure, and turbo pressure. Some models even had an optional digital instrument cluster and a voice synthesis trip computer, rare features for a car in this segment at the time. In 1985, Renault released a special edition called the Renault 11 Turbozender. This version was limited to just 650 units and came with a body kit designed by the German tuning company Zender. It had unique alloy wheels, special decals, and an improved suspension setup that used the rear axle from the Renault Super Sync. This gave it slightly better handling and a more aggressive stance. Renault marketed this version toward enthusiasts looking for a more exclusive version of the 11 Turbo. One of the most important aspects of the Renault 11 Turbo's history was its role in motorsport. After Group B rally cars were banned due to safety concerns, Renault Sport needed a new car to compete in Group A rallying. They chose the Renault 11 Turbo. The rally version of the car had a modified 1.4-liter engine with a larger turbocharger and intercooler, revised engine mapping, and a reinforced bottom end to handle the extra power. It also had a completely revised suspension with adjustable dampers and reinforced components for durability. The braking system was upgraded with larger discs and multi-piston calipers. Inside, the rally car had a stripped-out interior, a roll cage, racing seats, and harnesses. The Renault 11 Turbo saw success in rallying with drivers like Jean Ragnati and Alain Oret. In the 1987 World Rally Championship, the car took second place in the Portuguese Rally and third place in the San Remo Rally. Alain Oret won the Group A category in the 1986 Rally Monte Carlo, finishing 8th overall. Production of the Renault 11 Turbo ended in 1989, along with the rest of the Renault 11 lineup. It was replaced by the Renault 19, which had a more modern design and improved refinement. While the Renault 11 Turbo was never the fastest or most powerful hot hatch of its era, it was an important step for Renault. It showed that a small, practical car could be transformed into a serious performance machine. It was a competitor to the Volkswagen Golf GTi and Peugeot 205 GTi, even if it never reached their level of fame. One of the Renault 11 Turbo's most famous moments came outside of motorsport. In the 1985 James Bond film A View to a Kill, a Renault 11 was used in a famous chase scene through Paris. The car was driven by Roger Moore's James Bond, and during the chase, it was cut in half yet continued to be driven. This scene made the Renault 11 instantly recognizable to many viewers. Today, the Renault 11 Turbo is considered a rare find. Many of these cars were driven hard, modified, or scrapped over the years. Finding one in original condition is difficult, and prices for well-preserved examples have been rising. Enthusiasts who own them appreciate their unique combination of turbocharged power, lightweight design, and analog driving feel. The Renault 11 Turbo may not be as well known as some of its rivals, but for those who understand its history, it remains a significant part of the hot hatch era of the 1980s.